Good evening. Excuse me. Welcome to the Town of Aurora Council Public Planning Meeting. It is 7 o'clock, Mr. Clerk. Council, may I please have a motion to approve the agenda? Councilor Perry, Councilor Kim, comments or questions on the agenda? All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Declarations of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof, please. Seeing none. As we're in a public planning meeting, I do have a statement. Welcome to Aurora's public planning meeting. The purpose of this public meeting is to inform the public and to obtain public input regarding the proposed official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendments, draft plan of subdivision. No decision will be made tonight on either of the applications. For each planning application that will be considered by council tonight, the following process will occur. Town staff will outline the purpose of the planning application being considered. The applicant will then be given an opportunity to make a presentation or address issues that have already been raised in the staff report or public concerns which have already been filed. Following the presentation, members of the public will be invited to come to the podium and express their comments or concerns with respect to the proposal. And when we go through the audience, typically once, we then have either the proponent or a staff member address those concerns. Once we've heard from all the members of the public, I then ask members of the council if they have any comments or questions. It should be noted that a comprehensive report will be prepared and presented to a future general committee meeting, assessing the merits of the application before us and providing council with a recommendation for consideration. It is very important that the town receive the correct names and addresses of individuals having an interest in the application tonight. Therefore, if you plan to speak at council at this meeting or wish to be notified of any further council or committee meetings concerning the applications being considered, you must complete one of the green interested party forms that Linda's holding up, and please return it to Linda before you leave this evening. Under the Planning Act, any resident has a right to appeal any decision of council on a planning application to the Ontario Municipal Board, but you must verbally express any comments or concerns here tonight or submit any comments or concerns in writing to the town prior to council adopting such amendment. The Ontario Municipal Board may dismiss all or part of an appeal made in respect of an application. This public meeting is being audio and video recorded. Your name, address, comments, and any other personal information are being recorded according to the Municipal Act and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. This will help our town clerk prepare accurate minutes and to create a record that is available to the general public. Questions about this collection should be directed to the town clerk, Town of Aurora. I will now ask the town clerk to confirm that notification to the public occurred as required by the Planning Act. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Respecting item number 1, applications for official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, draft plan of subdivision, 2523059 Ontario Inc., 132 to 198 Old Bloomington Road, lots 11, 12, and 14, and part of lots 10 and 13 of Registered Plan 166, file numbers OPA 2017-05, ZBA 2017-07, and SUB 2017-03. On January 4th, 2018, a notice of complete application and public planning meeting was published in the Auroran and Aurora Banner newspapers and given by mail to all addressed property owners within a minimum of 120 meters of the subject lands. A notice of public planning meeting sign was also posted on the subject lands fronting Yonge Street. Respecting item number 2, applications for draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment, Shimvest Investments Limited, Prado Estates Inc., and Preserve Homes Corporation. 323 River Ridge Boulevard, Block 156, Plan 65M 4485, Block 231, Plan 65M 3971, and Block 164, Plan 65M 3946. File numbers SUB 2017-04 and ZBA 2017-09. On January 4th, 2018, a notice of complete application and public planning meeting was published in the Auroran and Aurora Banner newspapers and given by mail to all addressed property owners within a minimum of 120 meters of the subject lands. On December 21st, 2017, a notice of public planning meeting sign was also posted on the subject lands fronting River Ridge Boulevard. Public planning notification has been provided in accordance with the Planning Act.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I will now ask the Director of Planning and Development Services to begin with the presentations. Mr. Ramuto.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor, first item, we have our town planner, Marty Rokas, who will provide an overview of the planning applications, and then the applicants, planning consultants are also here, and they also have a presentation to provide to council and the members of the public. Marty?
Thank you, Mr. Ramuno. This is an application for to amend the official plan and the zoning bylaw, and for a draft plan of subdivision for properties at 132 to 198 Old Bloomington Road. The official plan amendments are to reduce the required buffer from adjacent estate residential designations and to increase building coverage. And the zoning amendments are to create 3 new R2 zones. That's from estate residential, which is currently there, and to permit single detached lots on smaller lots than what the estate residential permits, and site-specific performance standards for lot area, frontage, exterior side yards, lot coverage, and height. The draft plan of subdivision is what the amendments will allow to happen, and that is for a 50-lot draft plan with single detached lots on public roads, and it'll connect with the Ashland subdivision, which was approved by the Ontario Municipal Board in December, and it will also connect with Bloomington Road to the south. This is in red is where the subject lands are located. So Bloomington Road is on the south of the subject lands, and to the west is Yonge Street, and the Ashland subdivision is the 3 properties in between the subject lands in red and Yonge Street to the west, and that will connect in with the proposed subdivision here. The official plan designations of the subject lands are cluster residential and environmental protection area. In the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan, the properties are designated settlement area. And it is worth noting that the official plan recognizes that the boundaries of environmental protection designations may be imprecise, and they're intended to be refined through through the development application process. And the owner has applied for an exemption from a regional approval for the regional official plan. In red is the subject property, and the green is the environmental protection designation. The rest of the property has a cluster residential designation, which is the kind of pink designation there. And the zoning bylaw, the current zone is estate residential, and what that permits is detached dwelling with second suite and home occupation. The proposal is to redesignate that to a residential at R2 exception zones. And this is the current zoning on the property. So this is a copy of the draft plan of what's being proposed. There will be public roads that will be accesses from 2 different locations on the property. From the south will be from Bloomington. That'll line up with an existing intersection from a street that goes into Richmond Hill. And the street will loop around that central green space, which will be an open space that will be preserved as a forested open space. And then along the north, it will connect in with the Ashland subdivision, which is, you can see a bit of it on the northwest corner of the draft plan there. And that again is what was approved in December. And that will be a connection to Yonge Street through that section. There's also a stub for a future road. You can kind of see it there on the east side of the draft plan for potential future development to the east, which also has a cluster residential designation. We've done a preliminary review of the comment of the application, and there is still a review going on at the moment. So some of the preliminary things that we're looking at include the details of the official plan and zoning provisions, environmental considerations, including the Oak Ridges Moraine considerations and the woodlands feature that's on the site, the potential for future developments within Block C, The subject lands are part of Block C within the Yonge Street South secondary plan. So we're looking at how potential future developments and the existing development will interact with each other. Site servicing, drainage, as well as tree protection are also things that we have been looking at. And like I said, that review process is ongoing. Staff will continue to work with the applicant to finalize technical matters, and it will be brought back to a general committee meeting with a comprehensive report and recommendations when the application is ready for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marty. And for the proponent, we have Melinda Holland. Ms. Holland?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Melinda Holland, planner at the Biglieri Group. We're located at 20 Leslie Street in Toronto, Suite 121. We're the planning consultants that represent the applicant, 2523059 Ontario Inc., and we're here to provide a brief presentation on the proposed development and to answer any of your questions. As mentioned, the site is located just northeast of the major intersection of Bloomington Road and Yonge Street. The subject site is municipally known as 132 to 198 Old Bloomington Road, consisting of 7 separate parcels. The existing uses are estate residential lots occupied by 15 structures, including 6 single-family dwellings, 4 sheds, and 5 chicken coops. The site has an area of 10.12 hectares, or 25 acres, and has approximately 239 meters of frontage on Old Bloomington Road. As mentioned by Marty, the subject lands are designated as cluster residential in the Town of Aurora official plan through OPA 34 for the Yonge Street South secondary plan. The subject lands are zoned as estate residential in the Town of Aurora zoning bylaw. The applications required to implement the proposed development include the official plan amendment to permit increased coverage and reduce buffer from estate residential, the zoning bylaw amendment to permit the 3 separate R2 zoning categories, and the draft plan of subdivision. The development application proposes 50 single detached residential units with lots ranging from 19.81 meter frontages and 25 meter frontages. The unit count is in accordance with the policy 3.2.3C of the Yonge Street South secondary plan that permits 5 units per hectare or 2 units per acre. The proposed development has been designed with transitional lot sizes, with lots having frontages of 25 meters in the northern portion of the site to provide an appropriate transition to the estate residential to the north of the subject lands. And a 10-meter landscape buffer is also proposed along the northern limits of the property line. This is in accordance with policy 3.2.4A for transition in the Yonge Street South secondary plan and 3.2.4C for buffering. The subject site is accessed currently from Old Bloomington Road, but as Marty mentioned, the existing access to Old Bloomington from Bloomington will be realigned for a 4-way intersection with the development to the south. There are 2 public streets proposed. So Street A is the entrance to the proposed development, which is proposed with a right-of-way width of 23 meters. Excuse me. For a large public boulevard landscaping and a median entrance feature. Street B has a right-of-way width of 18 meters and provides a connection to the Ashland Holdings Inc. property to the west, as well as a future roadway connection to the other Block C lands to the east. Conceptual elevation drawings have been prepared for the proposed development as shown. The proposed elevations emphasize a combination of brick and stone finish, with 2 car garages, grand archways, and large windows. The proposed development will maintain a high standard of architecture and streetscaping to create a pleasant private and public realm. We will take any comments received tonight into consideration, and we'll continue to work with planning staff as they review the applications. We agree with the recommendation brought forward by staff, and we're happy to answer any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much, Ms. Holland. I'll now invite members of the public to come up. Those who are interested in addressing this application, please come to the podium. If you could state your name and your address. You have 5 minutes. There is a timer. There's a warning at 4 minutes. When we go through the audience once, we will ask either the proponent or our staff to address any questions or concerns you may have. And then if you still have questions, you are free to come back to the microphone after that. So I'll request anyone with respect to this proposed development come forward at this point. Don't be bashful. We don't bite, right, John?
So good evening, Council, and thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. My name is John Green. I live at number 5 Fox Point in Aurora, which is not too far from where this development is. I have had the opportunity to speak to Melinda Holland, who just presented, and she did answer a number of my questions. The reason, some of the things I want to talk about this evening is, first of all, I'd like to applaud the fact that the developer has applied the 2 units per acre rule, which means 50 units, and it almost uses up all of the available land. Lot sizes, when I look at the plan that was just presented, some of them are quite small compared to the estate residential lots, and even to the Ashland development, which is to the west, just south of Hunter's Glen. And some of the zoning changes that I note have been asked for, it's going to be somewhat cramped on some of those lot sizes, the smaller ones. The heights, for example, of the houses, when I look at the published requests for zoning changes, where 10 meters is the height that's been asked for in Ashland, 11 meters have been asked for in these particular homes. Now, that could be an issue from sight lines, from other people looking south at this new subdivision, and the description said that the homes should fit in with the surrounding, we'll say, culture or view. However, if there are many homes, like these 50 homes, and all of them are 11 and perhaps higher, it could present somewhat of a barrier to the view sites, the view lines of the existing residents. One of the concerns I have, and my neighbors have as well, and this also applied to Ashland, and that is the integrity of the wells that exist right now. There's 100-odd wells just to the north in the Hunter's Glen steeplechase development area. All these wells, I've never known of anything to go wrong with them. However, should anything go wrong, of course it means that the people living in those houses will be without water or unusable water, and of course the value of the houses will drop dramatically. The other thing is concerning really the ecological site. Now, I note that there's a large park in the middle, which is very, very good. But as a resident, I often see wildlife going through the area, from deer. In fact, last year one was actually had a little fawn that she delivered right there during the day. There's lots of coyotes that keep the rabbit population down. There's always a display of turkeys, and one sees them when they're very small, and usually there's 12 to 20 in a gaggle of turkeys. Maybe that's what it's called. And then they grow, we see them, we can even give names to them. So that's something that concerns me, in as far as, should people put fences up along these lot lines, it would prevent easy access and travel for this wildlife. So overall, as I say, I'm pleased with the 2 units per acre, but there are concerns that I've just spoken about. And and I guess that's the end of my travel. Is that 5?
You have 1 more minute.
1 more minute. Well, I'll use that to say thank you for listening patiently, and hopefully you'll have some answers to some of my questions. Thank you.
For coming out, sir.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Warren McClure, also in the Hunters Glen community just to the north. And I'll be brief because John has covered off a number of the issues. I again also would like to compliment the applicant for sticking within the 2 units per acre because the Ashland to the west did not. As you know, they became 3, and it was very disappointing. John mentioned the wells that we are on in our community, septic and wells. As the intensification builds around us, obviously Ashland, this project, and perhaps some others to the east, and then to the north will be coming in soon, another applicant. We as well owners are concerned. We've asked before, is there some kind of assurance or guarantee? If a well fails, what is the recourse? I'm not sure we've ever heard officially that there is strong protection, so I'd like to table that as a question for this applicant. The buffer to the north, which the applicant is proposing, which is great, 10 meters. I often wonder, though, how is that preserved? Once a homeowner moves in, they have a tendency to kind of expand what they do, maybe a pool, sheds, who knows what. So that buffer, is that planted to screen the homes to the north? And if so, how is that preserved over time, that the concept is not forgotten and it becomes part of the property? Same thing was with the Ashland, and I'm not sure how that was dealt with. I think it's not an easement, it's just kind of an obligation or a commitment, but I just see those kind of things through time kind of fall away. John mentioned the wildlife too, which I won't repeat everything he said, but indeed there is a lot of wildlife. The studies show there's nothing, but there are animals there, as John's mentioned. And they need to wander through this area because Hunters Glen they're large properties. Each one is 2 acres to 3 acres. There's a lot of wildlife. And as we build around and we put up fences and pools, etc., on both sides, those animals are somewhat restricted. So I think people address it sort of, but then it's kind of forgotten and the animals slowly move out. I mean, there's fewer and fewer of them everywhere. So that's kind of important if we can address that at the same time. Other than that, I like the project. And I would rest I have questions, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McClure. Any other speakers on this project? Ms. Holland, would you care to address some of those concerns, please?
Yes, thank you for those comments and questions. I just want to speak briefly to the question on the wells. We do have a hydrogeological and water balance report that has been submitted to the town, which is currently in the process of being reviewed. So we do have water monitoring wells in place. So that will be part of the review process. And then that was essentially it. I appreciate the comments on the density. We've worked to create a plan that is appropriate for the area and provides the proper setback to the existing estate residential. I will say on the note on the 10-meter landscape buffer how it will be implemented. So it will likely be required to have a landscape plan in support of it. That will be reviewed by the town to ensure through securities that the landscaping is implemented. So that is all I'd like to add.
Thank you. Mr. Rumino, could you please address the buffering and the long-term integrity?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. In this instance, there are 3 open space blocks that would be conveyed to the municipality, and we would be stewards of those open space blocks. And the one in particular is along the northern limit, and that would act as a buffer between these proposed lots to the north, on the north end, and the estate residential lots to the north. So the town will likely work with the applicant to create a additional landscaping within that buffer, and seeing as the town would retain ownership of that buffer, we would have complete control, and it wouldn't form part of those future private lots. So the town would have control. In other instances, as a couple of speakers have mentioned, the Ashland block to the north, we do include a dual zoning, a open space zone, and clauses in the subdivision agreement. In this instance, though, the town would retain ownership, and we would have control over that open space block to ensure that it would remain in an open space state.
Thank you, Mr. Rumino. Are there any other comments from members of the public? Seeing no more comments from members of the public, I'll close this portion of the meeting, and I will ask members of council if they have any questions for the proponent. Does anybody have any questions for the proponent? Seeing none, I'll close this portion of the meeting as well then, and if I could please ask a member of council to put the report on the floor so we can discuss it. Councillor Abel, thank you. Is there a second? Councillor Perry? Comments or questions on the report, please? Councillor Gartner, Councillor Kim.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Muno. On page 11, what is the, just east, there is a small circle. The map doesn't have a legend, so I don't know what it's supposed to be. And it repeats to the north.
Mr. Moreno.
It's just bordering the property.
Yeah, certainly. Through you, Mr. Mayor, and apologies, there should be a legend, and if I can ask Marty if we do have a legend, if you could put that on a PowerPoint. But that small hatched designation, I believe it is the designated environmental function area or buffer area.
What would that mean, environmental function area?
Again, we have I think 3 designations within this official plan document. It really is a lesser designation to identify environmental lands that aren't as significant as those that are identified as environmental protections. But I'll ask Marty to put the legend up on the screen just so we can confirm the designations. Okay, that's it. Well,
thank you.
right, so the light green would be environmental function area, darker green is environmental protection area.
Thank you. I'm not sure I've seen a subdivision similar to this where it surrounds an environmentally protected area. So what are the controls going to be in place to protect that environmentally sensitive area?
Mr. Moreno.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, the first thing that we need to do, and the applicant has submitted all the environmental evaluation reports as required under the Oak Ridges Moraine plan. So we will need to determine the exact limits of the environmental features and identify what the development limits are. The applicant's draft plan of subdivision, reflects their background work. We will verify that. Once that's confirmed, and if a plan is approved, that those environmental lands are typically conveyed to us, being the municipality, and we become stewards of those properties. And if required buffers are needed to be put in place, those become part of that environmental protection area. So we will confirm those boundaries moving forward. We do have those environmental reports. We will have those evaluated. When we report back, we will then confirm those boundaries and ensure the protections are in place for those features that will be left undeveloped and conveyed to the municipality.
Thank you. And aren't there always buffers around environmental land?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, and typically the environmental protection area will include a large area to ensure that there's appropriate buffers between the edge of that feature and development limits.
Thank you. And are we going to allow pools on these lots?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Once those development limits are identified, typically we allow amenity space and pools. Typically, there's only an issue if there are slopes, and in some instances, I'm not sure if that's the situation here. I don't think we're going to have significant slopes, but if there are significant slopes where retaining walls are required, that's typically where we put restrictions in place on private lots not to install pools because of the concern over the slope stability. But apart from that, we ensure that the appropriate fencing is installed, and there's typically no issue with respect to rear yards being used for, many space being pools, et cetera, and even accessory dwellings, sheds, et cetera. But again, we will confirm those limits of the development area.
Thank you. And we don't have any bylaw in place that says a pool can't be about how a pool needs to be trained as opposed to going into. We don't have anything on the books at the moment.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, good question, because that did come up about a year ago. I'll have to refresh my memory on that, but we were looking at our pool draining policies, so I'll report back to council on that.
Thank you.
Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess things went so fast that I didn't get a chance to, I didn't think quick enough to ask the builder's planner. But through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ramuno, is it fair to say that the majority or all of Aurora is currently zoned for 10-meter height and 35-meter lot coverage?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the majority of the zones, the R2, which are now R3 zones in the older parts of town, including the state residential areas, the height limits are 10 meters. But we do also have a majority of our zones and some of our new communities have 11-meter heights. On site-specific instances, even 12. With respect to lot coverage, the R3 zone has a 35% lot coverage in a lot of the established areas of town, but that does increase from 35 up to 50 in some of our new communities.
Councillor?
Given the size of the lots, 35% is quite substantial, and my preference is to hold it at 35%. If you could work with the builder and see if they could make the building envelope within that 35% envelope, that would be appreciated. I think given the smaller lots, and it looks like the lots do vary, and some of the smaller lots are noticeably smaller than larger ones, and I think 35% should be sufficient unless these are 6,000 square foot homes. So that's just the comment. If you could, if that's something that is negotiable, as well as the 11 meters, if it could keep it at 10 meters, that'd be ideal. I know with some of the construction going on in the Yonge and Bloomington area, just north of there, vibration has been a constant concern for existing homeowners. How would be fared? Could you give us an update in terms of some of the construction that's been going on over the last couple of years on the west side of Yonge, in terms of the vibration, and how have we handled it and to mitigate it, and how have we handled the residents' concerns?
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Mayor, our general practice is, especially in this area, we haven't been imposing a well monitoring condition, and a lot of the owners obviously know that it's standard practice, so they will monitor, they will have boreholes to monitor the wells and underground water during construction, so that is a standard condition. With respect to vibration, we have been receiving, occasionally we do receive complaints regarding construction activity and some vibration that affects neighboring properties. What we have been doing lately is relatively recent practice. We do require the applicant to undertake pre-condition surveys of adjacent properties. They'll subject to the agreement of those homeowners during the construction period. That way they'll be able to go back afterwards and do post-construction surveys and to determine whether there were any damages to their properties, foundations and exterior structures, pools, etc. during the construction period. So that'll be a condition that we would also impose on this subdivision application.
Thank you. And one last comment is, I know that a large part of the residents in Hunter's Glen and some of the homes without the who are on septic and well system, they moved here a long time ago, or because that's the lifestyle and the size of the lots, that's what existed since then. So water well would be a huge concern for me if I was a resident there. Is it possible, is it something you could discuss with the builder in terms of some kind of a safety net for homeowners? Because I would hate to see, excuse me, wells don't necessarily take 24 hours for it to break down, but maybe over years it may degrade. And is it possible to have the builder put in some kind of a reserve for potential, just as insurance for residents that they can access with certain limitations should something occur? I think that would really give them a peace of mind. Is that something that you think would be feasible?
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, it's a good question because it has been coming up a lot in this part of town with the surrounding private wells. Again, we do incorporate those well monitoring conditions, but what I will do is I will endeavor to go back and provide council, obtain a legal opinion, and report back to council with respect to how we can enforce whether there is an issue with problems with wells that may have occurred during construction, and whether we do, how we can legally enforce that. But so it's something I've made a note of, and we'll obtain a legal opinion and report back to council on that, just to ensure that we are protecting the neighboring properties' wells.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Mayor Daw. Marty mentioned that staff are still going through their due diligence with regards to the application, and so, my comment really is similar to Councillor Kim's, is that, I do share a bit of a concern with the increase in lot coverage and the building height, and how that massing may affect those that live in the area. We heard some of the delegates come and talk about view lines and so forth, and so, as part of that process that staff will go through with due diligence, I'd like to see them look into that and see what that massing and what that impact is as well. We heard some earlier conversations about, how unusual is that increase for in other areas of Aurora, and so some additional information like that would be helpful, because I share some of those concerns.
Councillor Abel?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. And I'm looking at the site plan, and I did a brief look on the Biglieri group. Their background, and one of the features is the landscape. The planner enjoys walking trails, etc. And it seems to me that we would want to have a second entrance into that huge environmental protection area at the north end. Would allow a walk-through trail, and would also access for the Ashland and the north end of that. So, I mean, I'm not picking or saying, but for example, lots 27 and 26, somewhere in there, if they can find a few inches on all the properties on the inside there to create a walkway as they had in the south end, I think that would make sense. It's also part of our, it's part of what Aurora is about, walking trails, and so it would make a complete path in there. So if you could ask Mr. Bermuno that be considered coming forward for GC when it comes forward. Thank you.
Councillor Tom?
Thank you, Mayor Daw. Not to harp on this, but I have major problems with the lot coverage and building height. As Councillor Kim mentioned, these are pretty big lots, and an increase of 5 percentage points on the lot coverage and even a meter in height is going to make a significant difference on the size of the homes, especially when they've requested a 25% reduction in the side yard setback and quite a significant reduction in the setback to the cluster residential homes to the north. We've seen this with the Ashland Holdings group to the west, where they requested 35 meters to the house as opposed to 35 meters to the lot line. I'm just wondering, Mr. Rumino, do you know what the difference would be? I mean, obviously it's going to be a massive difference, but, you know, if they were to adhere to the official plan for the area with the 35-meter buffer to the lot line of a unit within a cluster residential, as opposed to the house. I'd like to know what the difference of that is, if you have it. If not, then that's fine. But, I mean, essentially they're asking for, you know, smaller setbacks and bigger houses. So if you have that information, that'd be great.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just on the face of it, I mean, that OP requirement is a 35-meter setback lot line between the lot line of the cluster residential designation in the state. In this instance, at least it really impacts those lots along the north, lots 31, essentially through to 38. Not sure what their rear yard setbacks are, but I mean, they would probably be minimum of 7.5, 8 meters. So you're looking at, 8 minus 35, I think about 27-meter difference.
So it's a fairly large difference. I mean, the proponent came up and talked about transitioning from the estate residential in the north and moving south. And overall, I'm not opposed to the idea of this development. I think the group that came up, their architectural renderings were great, and I like that type of subdivision. I think I've seen some of their other work, and it's quite good. But I just worry about the residents to the north who are all on wells and septic. Maybe that buffer between them and the new homes coming into the south would give them a bit of more adequate space with dealing with those types of issues. So that's the major concerns I have. I'm not going to vote against moving this forward to GC, but I'd like to see some reductions in the request from a lot coverage perspective, the building height perspective, and I'd like to see our setbacks more closely adhered to before I can move forward with this at a general committee meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Tom. Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a procedural point first. I believe you had acknowledged that I had seconded this motion. Something to look at afterwards.
I'm sorry?
Just who is seconding? I thought you had mentioned my name, and I know that in the past those errors have caused issues. So if I'm wrong, great. I believe I seconded that motion, but ultimately it doesn't matter. So we'll look into that. This might be a dumb question, but normally when we're looking at rezonings and we're looking at lots and how something is being rezoned, we see a breakdown of where those zones are going to be. I don't see that indicated anywhere within this document. So I don't know what's going to be an exception 1 zone. I don't know what's going to be an exception 2 zone. I don't know what's going to be an exception 3 zone. I know they're going to exist, but I just don't know where those breakdowns are going to be. I think that would help me understand. It would help me understand all of that, to understand where those divisions are going to be. So I'm happy to move forward on this tonight, but prior to approving it, I think it's prudent that we understand that, and that will help inform the decisions that we all make.
Councillor Gartner for the second time. I'll go to Councillor Maracas first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Rumino. Mr. Rumino, if, and I'm not sure if this is the question that Councillor Tom asked you, but if it is and you don't have the answer, that's fine as well. But if the developer went, or the applicant went with the lot coverage of 35%, how many units would that reduce? How many units would be reduced if we went with the lot coverage of 35% instead of 40?
Wouldn't make any difference. Mr. Romero?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It doesn't necessarily mean that need to reduce number of lots. They could just, if we stick with the 35% lot coverage, it's the size of the homes would just have to be reduced.
Thank you. And so my point being is that it wouldn't reduce any amount of the units. So in my mind, to me, it doesn't really affect the amount. So therefore, I think that we need to adhere to that lot coverage, because I do agree that it's a big issue. I think moving 5% on such a big parcel of land makes a big difference in the size of the home. This area, as we've talked about many times, we've created a vision within our town for this area. Essentially, this is an estate home area, and that's what we've looked to create in this area. When we're looking to intensify and bring more density, we're looking more along the Yonge Street corridor, but to the north. And so this is not that area. So I would like us to stick to our plan on this in this area. I'm very happy that they've come in with the 2 units per acre, as some of the residents are. But the lot coverage is a huge sticking point with me on this one, and the height and the setbacks. And I will vote to allow this to move forward to general committee, but if this comes back at general committee and everything is presented the way it is tonight, then I'll be voting against it at that time.
Thank you. For the second time, we have Councillor Gartner and Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with all of the comments that have been made so far. I'm not interested in increasing the I'm not interested in increasing the height or the lot coverage, but I'm also not increasing the separation from estate residential. I spoke to this with respect to Ashland, and what the existing is 35 meters to the lot line of a unit within a cluster residential. What the change here is 35 meters to a house in a cluster residential, and that, as Councillor Tom said, that's not acceptable to me. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Romano. Mr. Romano, where is the drainage going in this area? Is there a stormwater pond to service this whole area?
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe they've identified a stormwater pond, but I mean, we do have the background information and master servicing plan, so we'll need to take a look at that and see how they're handling stormwater. A lot of newer developments sort of introducing sort of the low impact development, the LIDs, but that's something that we certainly need to take a look at.
Thank you, but it won't be anywhere near the environmentally protected area.
No, again, any stormwater coming from the new development, I mean, we'll have to maintain the pre-development flows, so it'll all be contained within the development area.
Thank you. And can you speak again to what we can do to A, ensure the integrity of the wells, and B, protect the residents should something happen to their wells? Realistically, what can we do?
Mr. Romano, sorry.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I don't believe we've come across that situation where we've had an issue with someone's well being impacted, but of course we understand it's a concern, so we do include as a condition of approval that will be attached to the subdivision that there is well monitoring that occurs during construction. But I will commit to, again, obtaining a legal opinion to ensure what the municipality can do and how we can protect neighboring residents if that would happen and it was deemed to have occurred as a result of construction activity. And one situation is, if there is an issue with a well that needs to be re-drilled, that it should be the onus should be on the developer if that activity caused the damage to the well. But again, it's something that we'll certainly look into and provide a response to council. But moving forward, we have been incorporating those conditions attached to all our development applications in this part of town.
Councillor?
And is it possible to hold back money for a period, for 5 years, 10? Is there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's something I'm going to have to look into and report back on.
So the only thing that hasn't been mentioned by anybody except the resident is the wildlife On page 12 on the index, it does say, I believe, wildlife corridor, but it doesn't say if there actually is one. Maybe I'm on the wrong page. Yes, it's page 12, very bottom, Oak Ridges Marine Natural Linkage Area. Is there actually a natural linkage area in this, on this land or in this area?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't see that on the OP schedule, but we'll definitely take a look, because we do have an Oak Ridges Marine, or Oak Ridges Marine schedules, and there may be some linkages identified in this area. Again, we have, the applicant has submitted all the required Oak Ridges Marine background reports, so it's something that we're going to evaluate, and if need be, we typically have a peer review done of some of those environmental reports, as we have been doing in this area, and so we'll ensure that all those matters are addressed, specifically ensuring that those environmental features are identified and protected, and that any wildlife corridors that need to be protected are protected.
Thank you. I am concerned about that. Actually, it shows that the natural linkage area, thank you, Councillor Thompson, is at the bottom of the page. It looks like it's running along Bloomington. Sorry, yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. My apologies, Councillor Gardner. Is it?
It's page 12, and it's the bottom,
correct.
very bottom left.
Yeah,
Almost
no,
in the
I see
corner.
that. So that is our page 12, which is our existing zoning bylaw. So it does identify a natural linkage, Oak Ridges Marine Corridor, running along that southern boundary. South of, appears to be south of Old Bloomington Road.
Thank you. Well, to my fellow councillors, and it took me a long time to really understand this, but this whole area was probably an area that wildlife could go back and forth freely, and it kept them viable. And now we've put up a lot of buildings that are blocking their way. And so, you know, if you have a wildlife that's going to travel up to a certain point and then they can't get any further, well, that could be detrimental to their well-being. So I would ask council and staff and the developer to see if we can't provide, I would think it would be a very wide area that we would need. And maybe it would be partly with this development and partly with the development that may be coming into the east of it, although there is going to be a road. But I do think that we just, you know, we just can't think. It sounds Pollyannish, but we just can't think about people and houses. We also have to think about the wildlife that we share the space with.
Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. I had a couple of questions I forgot to ask the first time. So going back to page 6 and 7, we spoke about the side yard setbacks, lot coverage, and building height, which is the proposed zoning bylaw amendment to the R2 zone. They're asking for R2 exception zones, but the official plan amendment, I'd like to ask Mr. Ramuno some questions on that. So the building coverage maximum in the existing official plan, which I'm assuming is OPA 34, is 12%, and the requested proposed official plan policy is unspecified. Could you explain how that reconciles with the zoning amendment to 40? They're asking for 40, but even to 35. I'm not sure what unspecified means.
Mr. Member?
Certainly through you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, it's correct, the official plan, OPA 34, does have building coverage percentages, and it is 12%. And I don't have the definition in front of me, but I think that it factors in the total building coverage within a given block area, and that has been very difficult to try and implement on a larger scale. And since we implemented OPA 34, even prior to my coming to town, I think staff have been relying on capturing a lot coverage through the zoning bylaw, so the typical 30 or 35% lot coverage on a given lot. And the other policies that are in place at the OP level, which they're not varying here, is I believe there's a 40% requirement under the official plan to ensure that a minimum of 40% of an area of the secondary plan is maintained in a natural state. The other OP policy, just to clarify, because I believe we've been talking about lot coverage, is a 35-meter separation distance from a state residential designation to a future cluster residential designation. And so that essentially requires between lot line and lot line. And the applicant is proposing an exception to that to require a 35-meter separation distance from the state residential lot line to the future home. Then we deal with the 35% lot coverage. But there is a 35-meter separation distance between a state residential designation and the future cluster residential designation.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. I got that bit because I think we talked about that before when I asked my questions earlier, but I just was confused because even with the Ashland application, I don't really recall if we were, which was the same area, it's just to the west, whether we were given a chart that said 12% and unspecified. It just seems a bit odd. The other thing I thought was interesting is that the owners requested an exemption from regional approval of the official plan amendment application. What does that mean? I don't recall ever seeing that before. So the region typically, I don't think the region's ever said they don't approve an application, but why would an owner request an exemption from regional approval? Mr. Moon?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, that's a process that the region's had in place for years. They are the approval authority of local official plans, but they do have a policy in their official plan that provides for an exemption process. And they ask that applicants make a submission to the region when they are submitting local official plans, amendments to the local municipality, and they have criteria, and they will, in cases where they feel there are no regional impacts, they will exempt that application from their approval. And what that means is the local council is the approval authority of that local official plan. So once local council adopts that official plan, we become the approval authority. So the region only requires that they review and report to their regional council on official plan amendments that are considered significant and have regional interests, such as large secondary plans or local official plan amendments.
Great, thank you. This is obviously a small parcel in Aurora, but it's part of the Oak Ridges Moraine, so it's pretty important. But anyhow, again, I just reiterate that my main concerns, that many around the table have the same, is, they're asking for bigger houses with smaller setbacks, and I think for me that needs to change before I finally approve this.
Councilor Rakis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Ramuno. Mr. Ramuno, does this application fall under the new legislation of Bill 139 or under the old legislation?
Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, my opinion, it'd fall under the Bill 139 because, any previous decisions of council prior to the end of 2017 would likely still fall under the old the previous legislation. So in this instance, it would fall under 139, Bill 139.
Well, thank you, and that's good to hear. So thank you for that. And then I just through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Ramuno, in regards to the vibrations, and I know that we've had discussions on this, and we go out and we do mitigation factors, and we check, and it has to meet a certain standard. That standard, can the municipality set that standard, or is that provincially set?
Mr. Middle?
To you, Mr. Mayor, no, that is an established, I'm not sure if it's a provincial standard, but it's an engineering standard of vibration standard. So it's something that our engineers and, all consulting engineers need to adhere to once. So when they do go out and install vibration monitors, there is a set standard that they need to meet. And so we have been requesting, and it has been working well. We've started, we've required that applicants do go out to do those surveys of residents and install those vibration monitorings where we feel that there is a need. So we have been requiring that of all applicants over the past couple of years.
And I guess just as a follow-up through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Muno, so when they do go out and they meet with the residents and they're in the home and the monitoring shows that it meets the standards, but the house is shaking. Glasses look like they're going to fall off the kitchen counters and stuff. I've been in one of the houses, and it's incredible how much it actually shakes. And to me, if that meets the standards, I think that they need to look at changing the standards. But when they're in there and that is occurring, do they take a different approach, or do they just basically say that it meets the standards? It's too bad, deal with it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, I mean, we've had some recent examples where we've had calls, the applicant's engineers have gone out and they have changed their methods. They have, they use different equipment in those extreme cases. So, no, we've had some good responses lately. And so, again, we will work with this applicant moving forward as well to ensure that those conditions are imposed and that they work with our neighboring residents.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ramon.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Seeing no other speakers, the motion is on the floor. Councillor Perry, did you have a question in terms of mover and the seconder? Okay, thank you. In that case, Council, seeing no more comments, I will ask for the vote. Using your tablets, please. Councillor Maracus? Thank you. We've got everybody. And that passes 7-1. So that will move forward to a general committee meeting sometime later this spring, probably. Again, if you have an interest in this particular application, please ensure that you fill out a form and return it to Linda. You want to hold that up again, please, Linda? And we'll just, before we move on to the second, does anybody want to take a break? Or we're good? We'll just try to be nice. Break. Let's take a 5-minute. Okay, we'll take a quick 5-minute break then. Okay, council, if I could ask you to come back, please. Councilor Gartner? Councilor Peary? Did you break it? Okay, councilors? Can we start, please? Thank you. We'll move to the second application. And I'll ask Caitlin to come up and do the presentation for the town.
All right, good evening, Mayor Daw and members of council. The next application is a draft plan of subdivision and a zoning bylaw amendment. The subject lands are located at 323 River Ridge Boulevard. The purpose of the applications is to permit the development of a plan of subdivision consisting of 25 single detached residential lots, a public right-of-way, a pedestrian walkway, and a reserve block. And you can see the subject lands are located north of Wellington Street East. They're between Bayview Avenue and Leslie Street. And to the north, south, and west are existing single detached residential dwellings, part of the 2B secondary plan. And to the east are environmentally protected lands. And just a bit of background, the owners are proposing to develop 3 remnant parcels of land together through one proposed draft plan of subdivision. All 3 of these parcels of land are blocks within approved and registered subdivisions where environmental buffers of 20 meters to 25 meters have already been established from the adjacent provincially significant East Aurora Wetland Complex through OPA 30, which is the Bayview Northeast 2B secondary plan. And these areas have already been conveyed to public ownership. The Pareto and Preserve blocks have already been zoned for residential use through the previously approved draft plans of subdivision. And site-specific zoning exceptions are being requested by the owners to facilitate this development, which are outlined in the staff report. And I just wanted to note that the remainder of the 2B lands are also subject to site-specific zoning exceptions. The proposed applications will be reviewed for consistencies with all of the listed provincial, regional, and municipal policies. And the existing official plan designation, the property is outlined in red, which is designated as low medium density residential within the 2B secondary plan. And the existing zoning bylaw, again outlined in red. It's kind of hard to see on this one, but the subject lands are currently zoned detached third density residential, exception 281 zone, and detached fourth density residential R4, exception zone 310, and rural. And this slide shows the proposed draft plan of subdivision, as well as a breakdown of the proposed blocks and land uses. You can see the 3 frontages that are being proposed, 11 meters, 12.2 meters, and 15 meters. The applicant has also submitted a draft zoning bylaw schedule. And the table I've included is just a breakdown. There's a lot of numbers and letters. So the R3, there's 3 R3 zones, and the reason for that is lots 6 and 7 will require specific interior side yard setbacks due to a water main easement that runs down the middle of the lots, or not the middle of the lots, sorry, the middle of the property line dividing the two lots. So those two are requiring separate exceptions, and then the balance of the properties or the proposed lots would be zoned either an R3 exception zone or an R4 exception zone. So department and agency comments. The first submission has been circulated to internal and external agencies for comment. And we've also identified matters to be addressed prior to the preparation of the final report. Some of these matters include looking at the compatibility and appropriateness of the proposal relative to the existing and future surrounding land uses. As well, looking at environmental considerations, the applicant has submitted an environmental impact study, as well as the requested site-specific zoning provisions. And in conclusion, staff will continue to work with the applicant and undertake a technical review, as well as to address comments received from the circulation agencies and departments, and any other comments received via correspondence or from tonight's public planning meeting. And I do note that correspondence was received via email just earlier tonight, and that will be reviewed and taken into consideration through the process. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Joe McIntyre.
Good evening. My name is Joan McIntyre. I'm a principal of Malone Given Parsons Limited at 140 Renfrew Drive, Markham. I've been working in this area for well over 20 years on the west side of the watercourse and more recently on the east side. These two parcels, as Caitlin mentioned, were part of approved subdivisions, and they were zoned at the time of the rest of the subdivision for future residential development as single-family homes. These are the three owners Caitlin reviewed. Some of these developers are builders of your community in 2B, as well as being builders in the eastern lands, the 2C West community. The purpose of some of the zoning amendments is to allow them to continue to build similar product to what they've been doing in the newer community. The Prado and preserve lands, as mentioned, are already zoned for residential use. The Shimvest piece was in the 2B lands, but the remainder of the lands were in the 2C lands, and they were landlocked, and they never put in a development application at the same time as the other owners. So the Prado and preserve blocks anticipated the extension of a road through the lands, similar to this, probably ending in more of a cul-de-sac, as some of the northern lands were anticipated to be left as open space. This plan, the town has informed us that the park is not required there. And I think your parkland requirements are more than satisfied in this area. So the configuration of the site has led us to this irregular looking site, and there's a water main, as Caitlin mentioned, going through the end of the road, connecting to the 2C lands and looping the municipal water system. There's a mix of lot sizes, predominantly 40-foot lots. The density is within that permitted in the official plan. And the larger lots have been located primarily along the south, adjacent to the existing residential and along the valley system. The westernmost lot on the south side is adjacent to a 50-foot lot, and it is also shown as a 50-foot lot. The environmental buffers were established through the studies done for the 2B lands, which were quite extensive and time-consuming. I was around for those. And the southern buffer, just the southern buffer was conveyed long ago when the subdivisions were registered. The piece surrounding the Shimvest lands were conveyed to the town probably in 2011, and the EIS determined that those were adequate buffers. We don't need to go over this. Just to note that all of the houses will have double car garages and 4 parking spaces on site. And a number of new reports were submitted. All of these plans of subdivision and zoning applications in the past provided the series of technical reports required, which included these lands, and these reports have been provided to update those reports and to support the addition of the few lots on the east side. So the community or the neighborhood that we're creating here will extend and complete that which is existing and was anticipated long ago. It has regard and is consistent with all the provincial, regional policies, municipal planning documents, and it meets the requirements of the Planning Act. Thank you for listening. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thanks, Joan. We'll now open it up to members of the public. We'll track the questions, and then we'll probably get you back up. Anybody who would like to speak to this, please come up, give us your name and your address. You have 5 minutes. There's a warning at 4 minutes. When we go through once, I will direct those questions to the proponent or staff, and then if you have more questions, you're free to come back.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. My name is Amandine Boudreau, and I'm a resident at 18 McLarty Gate. I represent tonight 25 members of the community directly impacted by the proposed development, many of which could not be here this evening. We are very concerned with the proposed draft plan for the development in that it will have significant negative impact to the community, wildlife, and impact the road congestion and safety of the neighborhood. The addition of 25 new dwellings represents an overwhelming increase over the originally described potential development of the land, which was limited to 6 homes in a small cul-de-sac. This represents an increase in the number of houses to 417% of the original proposal, which the community feels would be detrimental to the neighborhood. Of particular concerns are the following. The parcel of land that's adjacent to the proposed development is designated as an environmentally protected, and therefore significant development proposed is not compatible with the adjacent use of the land. The environmentally protected land parcel contains a stormwater retention pond that was established over a decade ago. So although the original intent of this stormwater retention pond was not to attract wildlife, the resulting pond has significant fauna and flora that has been established and provides an attractive green space for the community. The green space is home to a number of birds, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, aquatic life, trees, shrubs, grasses, and insects, which will be threatened by the proposed construction. In addition, there's been efforts from the community by implementing nesting boxes that have been installed and attracted bird populations, which have been documented in the Breeding Birds study of Aurora study from 2017 conducted by Nature Aurora. Essentially, the proposed development will surround and block off this small environmentally protected land and separate it from the remainder of the environmentally protected land. The proposed development conflicts with the Town of Aurora's corporate environmental plan, whose long-term vision, as described in the September 2010 report, has a fundamental principle described in section 2.16, which is to protect existing stable neighborhoods, both older and newer. The proposal would disrupt the community with a massive expansion in the number of homes, which will be detrimental to the quiet community, which is characterized by its green open space and open views and wildlife habitat for a number of species surrounding the pond. So as you probably see from the map, there are very few opportunities to live alongside nature in the Bayview-Wellington community due to the size of the existing development. It would be a shame to disrupt one of the few areas left which provides a space for residents to enjoy green space. Another concern raised is the increase in vehicular traffic, which can result in congestion in the area. In particular, the proposed plan for the subdivision would increase the current traffic to the area from 18 homes on the current street, which include the two corner homes at Mavernack, to 43 homes using River Ridge Boulevard east of Mavernack, which represents 239% the number of existing homes. So that, approximately is 2.5 times more traffic. And currently, it is congested, and there is, at peak times, the area is difficult to merge into the roundabout due to a number of pedestrian crossings en route to and from Hartman Public School, which is further on River Ridge. As well, there's many bus stops proximal to the location which serve the children of the River Ridge community. The residents would like to understand the measures taken to ensure the safety of children which are going to and from school and to the bus stops in the community during and after the construction period. Currently, the area has a number of school bus stops located proximal to the streets, so right along Mavronack at River Ridge as well as on McLarty. And we are concerned for the safety of children with the number of construction vehicles which will be required during the proposed expansion. We'd also like to understand the noise and pollution precautions that have been taken during the construction and the impacts that this may have on the neighboring residents, as well as the wildlife in the adjacent environmentally protected area. We'd also like to understand how the proposed developments will impact the proposed wildlife park. In fact, the wildlife park would be proximal to the environmental protected parcel, and the resulting construction could sever any corridor for the wildlife to and from the existing stormwater retention pond. And this development seems to contradict the recommendations in the Town of Aurora's Parks and Recreational Master Plan. In the plan, section 6.6, Natural Environmental Lands, the report describes that the goal is to promote the development of environmental education, initiatives that informs the community about the role of the individuals in enhancing ecological processes, and has to a goal to teach them how to live sustainably within the immediate environment. And lastly, we are also concerned about the grouping of trees that is on the existing land that the residents were informed were protected, and would like to know if an arborist has been consulted to determine the potential impact of the construction to the existing trees and what the plan is to ensure that they are not directly impacted by the construction.
If you could wrap up, please. Thank you very much. Other speakers, please. Please. Oh, come on. I'll remind you, sir, you have 5 minutes. There's a warning tone at 4.
Well, it'll only take a couple
Okay.
seconds.
And
Like
if your
I
name
say,
and
my
address,
thunder
please,
was stolen, so. No, and basically, the only thing that I could add as far as the new proposal, I have been on River Ridge, and I'm just about maybe 10, 12 houses north of where the subdivision is taking place. And initially, there were supposed to be, I think, 6 to 8 homes that were to be put there. Now we're up to 24. That adds congestion as far as the street is concerned. It takes away from the neighborhood, and that's what appealed to me when I first saw the subdivision. It is getting crowded, and the more crowded it gets, the more dangerous it is as far as the roundabouts are concerned, especially with the construction that has taken place off of Leslie, north of Wellington. Coming down in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening, it is the Wild West on Mavronack. It is, if someone sees someone that is maybe 20 feet away from a roundabout, it is a race to who gets there first. And they don't watch what cars are entering the same intersection at that time. So we are adding more danger as far as children are concerned in that area. I myself, I mean, all of my children are grown, but if I had young kids, I would not allow them on the streets with the way that, that things are going in that area. There's just too much traffic. People don't care. Their aim is to get to either the train station or get to the office, regardless of who it endangers. And I'm worried about kids, I'm worried about grown-ups, I'm worried about the elderly, and something, you know, this I think is something that I think the only I think things that have been thought as far as the number of units is money. It has not taken the subdivision itself into account and what people are looking for. Those homes, the homes that were sold 9 years ago and that were sold for a particular reason, the look, the area, the ambiance that I guess the way that the subdivision was laid out is being lost you know, for someone to make a profit on, you know, another 5, 6 homes. And I don't think it serves the area well, and it doesn't serve the residents very well. So, you know, you can take what I just said and maybe give it some thought and maybe rethink as far as the density.
Before you run away, sir, we didn't catch your name.
Andrew Fody.
Thank you very much.
294 River Ridge Boulevard.
Thank you very much, sir.
And my blood type is A positive, if that's
We
required.
probably don't need that, but we appreciate it just in
But I
case.
thought I'd give it out anyway. All right, so I mean, that's basically my, my presentation, and hopefully it'll be taken into account, and you know, the people here give it some thought and maybe rethink the density. I mean, there is no problem with adding some homes, but not this number of homes. It's just overkill. You're taking away natural lands that were designated for a specific person, and this has been cut in half. You know, so that's all I have to say. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and hopefully you'll rethink and maybe we'll get some good decisions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other speakers, please? I see 2 more anyways. Remind you if you could give us your name and address. Thank you very much.
Catherine Gear, 22 McClarty Gate. I agree with all the speakers, with the 2 speakers so far, with regard to concerns in the number of homes. I just wanted to make a couple of emphasize a couple of points, in particular the loss of the view of the landscape. That particularly with the homes that are proposed to be built behind the drainage stormwater pond, I think that's going to have a significant impact on the view that all members of that subdivision enjoy, because there are very few views left. Many are blocked by the homes that are built directly backing onto the environmental lands and the green space. And secondly, just want to emphasize the concerns with the volume of traffic. That with 25 homes, additional homes, with opportunities for 4 parking spots per home, that's an awful lot of additional vehicles in the neighborhood that is going to have a significant impact, and concerns with regard to traffic flow during and after development. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Greg Hambley, 75 McLarty Gate. Worship and Council, thank you for letting me speak today. A lot of what has been said echoes what I was going to say, so I'll try and be brief. But when many of us bought properties in the area, close to 10 years ago, the overall site plan for the full subdivision did not include that additional parcel of land that was east of the stormwater management pond. That parcel of land was never part of that plan. We still have it in our original sales documents from when we purchased. That has a lot of implications, part of which was spoke to with regards to view. A lot of us bought that with the idea that at the end of that street there was a pond and then there was green space, knowing that it would be built in from Leslie back, where those houses are currently being finished now. But now all of a sudden there's houses being put in between, sandwiched in there, which was never part of any documentation that we received when we originally purchased. In addition to that, the safety concerns I think have been echoed already. It is a bit of a disaster around the area with regards to roundabouts, and especially I know if I take my son out for a walk, trying to cross the streets in those areas are already very hectic. I can't imagine when you throw all these construction vehicles in there what that is going to be like, and is there going to be a bunch of parking of construction vehicles on River Ridge and on McLarty Gate during this, I would imagine, fairly intensive build project. The environmental impact, I was around when some people were walking the land out there, considering the town purchasing that back and leaving it as open space. And some of the concerns of, I know some of that water level has been lowered, kind of man-made lowered further north to lower that kind of watershed there. And I wonder that if we're building kind of almost in the middle of that, considering the level of the stormwater management pond as it exists now, the amount of flora and fauna that has built up in the last decade in that stormwater management area, in addition to everything that is existing along that corridor, specifically between Wellington and St. John's Side Road. I see there's some amendments with percentage of lot coverage, one at 35% going to not applicable, and one at 50% going again to non-applicable. I would question why that would need to change. If there was an issue with easement or whatnot, as far as the, I think there's some piping that goes underground there, then shouldn't that be taken lots, maybe one less lot, and adjusted so that that percentage could be maintained, which it has been with all the other lots in the area. Finally, I truly don't understand how, coming back to the first point of that extra parcel of land, I know when it was originally presented is that the phrase something like, I think there is already enough parkland in the area was the comment. I don't think is a good reason to all of a sudden take an additional parcel of land directly beside an environmentally protected area and let's slap some more homes up on it. Pardon the lack of terminology there, but I don't think that's a solid reasoning for us to provide when we can see all of the other reasons to keep this land protected. I'm not saying we got to go spend millions of dollars to put a beautiful park that people could go play, but I think we need to consider that parcel of land out there and dedicating that to the environmental area. We've lost so much in Aurora. We can continue to lose more environmentally protected area in Aurora, and that particular piece, I think, is going to have a vast impact on all of the things that have been talked about already. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other speakers at this point? Ms. McIntyre, do you have any comments at this point with respect to any of the questions or concerns that have been raised? Come to the microphone if you would.
No, I haven't seen a plan that shows the number of units in there. However, from my work in this project, that last eastern parcel was always a question mark because of its long-term development. So the two other pieces have been zoned, and they could not be built until that piece was used to complete the subdivision. So it would have been anticipated there would be additional lots within that land. Always. Otherwise, you wouldn't extend the cul-de-sac in there to complete it. And as far as my comment on parks, I don't know if there was ever any agreement for the municipality to buy that as a park. I think the owner just didn't know what to do with it and had asked if you might be interested.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Ramuno, can you comment on how a bit of the history, I guess, perhaps?
Certainly. To you, Mr. Mayor. As was mentioned in the previous presentations, I mean, the property before council this evening is really made up of three separate applicants, two Prado and the reserve or preserve. Those blocks were registered and zoned when the 2B subdivision, the River Ridge subdivision, was approved back in the early 2000s. The third block, being the easternmost block, was owned by Shimvest, and they own the parcel that continues on east of the valley into 2C, and that land was developed, and this parcel was severed from that land a number of years ago, and so that's why the application is proceeding today, and it didn't proceed years ago. Just to clarify, as council's aware, that we did go through an exhaustive planning process for both the 2B secondary plan area and the 2C secondary plan area, and those development limits of the land and the extent of the buffers and the environmental protection areas were dealt with at that time, and those lands have been conveyed to the municipality that are environmental protection area and now form part of the wildlife park. So the lands in question under our official plan are designated low and medium density. Of course, staff will review the plans moving forward to ensure that the lot sizes and setbacks are appropriate. But just to clarify, the entire land holding is designated low and medium density designation under 2B, and the wildlife park lands have been conveyed to the municipality. And we do have, as council is aware, hundreds of acres that run along that corridor between Wellington and St. John's.
Actually, Mr. Ramuno, I apologize. If you could comment on, because as I recall, this would not have any effect on the current extent of the proposed wildlife park, and whether or not we're losing environmentally protected land. I think that's also a very important point.
Certainly. To you, Mr. Mayor. No, again, just to clarify, the lands that are subject to these applications are not environmentally protected lands. They are developable lands, and the municipality does currently own the balance of the lands to the north, south, and east that form part of the wildlife park, and those lands are considered environmentally protected, which includes the appropriate buffers. So again, I think one of the previous presentations identified the extent of the EP lands and the 25-meter buffer that were required, and those have been conveyed to the municipality. So again, just to clarify, the lands before council this evening are designated for residential development, and the two parcels were previously zoned back in the early 2000s.
Thank you, Mr. Ramuno. At this point, any other comments from the public? Please, yep. No, come on, just got to come up to the microphone before you start speaking. And we do ask you to give your name and address again, please.
Okay, Andrew Fody, 294 River Ridge Boulevard. The only thing that I'd like to add at this point is that I think what is being lost with all of this, subdivisions and cramping in homes, we forget that areas should be neighborhoods. We should get back to where we were, all right? And that's what we've forgotten. We start cramming people in, and the more people you get in these areas, the farther apart they become because they don't pay attention to each other. Because there's no place to gather, there's no place to speak and build relationships. That's basically what it is, and I think we've forgotten all of that. We forgot that neighborhoods are what matters. The reason that I purchased here in Aurora was because of the neighborhoods. Like 9 years ago, it was totally different than it is today. All we have now is like traffic. People don't walk anymore. You very seldom see anybody. It's not a community. You could just as well live in an apartment building for all the contact that you get with people that you're supposed to, form relationships so that, you look after each other. And that's what matters. So, that's it.
Thank you very much, sir.
I'm Amandine Boudreau from 18 McClarty Gate. I just have a question regarding the zoning. So I don't really understand how it works, but I understand that the 2C, according to Plan 2C and 2B, was done in 2000, around that time. Is it possible, because now there's been significant development in the Leslie St. John area, we've kind of, does council take a look at what changes have occurred since then and reconsider the zoning, or is it once that it's zoned that way, there's no reconsideration after significant development in the following years?
That's a great question. I'll come back to it because I know the gentleman up here also has a couple of comments.
Greg Hambley, 75 McClarty Gate. So just a clarification on the kind of the northernmost tip of that parcel of land in the, as far as the diagram goes, I guess the Shinvest area. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not 100% on the when the zoning actually happened, but originally when we purchased, I was under the impression, and the documentation that I have at home seems to support that zoning of the original 2 parcels of land, I don't think anybody is questioning that here tonight. But that 3rd parcel of land, if we go back to when the original development and master plan took place, I don't believe was zoned as residential at that point in time. That parcel of land was still part of the farmland that was the easternmost point from the farm that had the silo on the Leslie side of the environmental protection area. And when that farmland then sold to developers, there was that little parcel of land left on the west side of the environmental protection area, just east of the stormwater management pond, that kind of nobody knew that kind of got scooped up by the developers that were, again, I'm under the impression, correct me if I'm wrong, that they kind of thought, okay, we'll just add this in with those other 2 parcels that have already been approved. But I don't think that was ever brought forward publicly to any of the homeowners in the area at that time when that zoning was changed. I mean, I don't ever remember receiving any documentation to that effect. And then furthermore to that is that I know Mr. Mayor and some members of council and environmental consultants came out and walked the area considering to purchase the land back, to have the town purchase that parcel of land back. And at that point, from the conversations I had, it had been rezoned then to residential at that point. So the cost to recuperate that land would be fairly significant to the town, and probably part of the reason why it wasn't purchased back. But I wonder if we go backwards, is that a good enough reason for us when we consider all of those things that were probably looked at when the town was considering purchasing that land back? Are we considering that now? Why didn't we consider that kind of back when that land wasn't zoned residential, and probably could have recuperated that parcel of land at a much lower rate before the developers kind of picked that up and added it in with those 2 original parcels? Again, I think their intention all along was those 2 parcels weren't finished because their hope was to add that other piece on, even though it was not zoned with those original 2 parcels that are left there existing now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Rumino, could you give a bit of a history on the zoning? Oh, I'm sorry. Pardon me, sir.
My name is Mo Shahadi. I'm at 58 McClarty Gate. I'm the house directly siding onto the pond, or that little water management thing. And this is the first time I see anything that looks like that. I think I was the first person that purchased the lot there. I bought the first house on that whole property. And that's why I got that lot, because that was the end of the street, and it was at the time the best lot that was available, and I picked it out. So originally there was nothing showing on the other side of that water management, and that's what kind of made me decide to purchase that particular lot. There was talks about having 18 homes which continue along River Ridge, the continuation of River Ridge, and nothing more. And that's as from what I remember, because this is talking 12 years ago, I think, is when we purchased those lots. So there was always talks of 18 additional homes coming in, and that's where the trailer was at the time when they were building the homes, and that's all that there was in the talks at that point when we purchased. Now, what doesn't make sense to me, and that's just maybe I'm a little biased because I live in that area, is why would we enclose that little water management that connects to that whole section of green space? You're pretty much killing, you know what I mean, such a huge space that gives you, whether it's a view or it connects that little water management that has a lot of wildlife that's connected to that whole green space just to build, from what I see here, I think 4 homes, which just doesn't make sense. That's my opinion, at least. So I think this is the first time I see all these. So I'm just coming back from soccer, so I'm not quite dressed. So I think there's about 4 homes that block that whole area to connect that little water management, which sees, if you go there on any given day, you'll see from turkey to deer. We've seen all kinds of stuff there. And you're just going to enclose that with 3 or 4 homes. That does not make sense. And that's my opinion.
Thank you very much, sir. Okay, now I'll ask Mr. Rumuno on those zoning questions.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. And the last 2 speakers are correct. They would have likely had seen from their builders in their sales office and their brochures and the site plan an extension, lotting on the extension of River Ridge on either side. I think those plans may have shown a number of lots. They wouldn't have seen lotting or zoning for that eastern parcel because it wasn't part of an application at that time. It was part of a separate ownership. So that's correct. But the lands were always identified in our official plan for residential use, but the zoning is still rural, and so the applications before us, is to rezone that land from rural to residential, as well as to make adjustments to the other 2 blocks that were previously zoned residential back in 2001 or 2002 as part of that 2B planning process. So it's correct, those homeowners who bought from River Edge wouldn't have seen the zoning or the lotting pattern for that eastern block because that landowner hadn't submitted an application. It wasn't part of the 2B. He developed the majority of his lands later on as part of the 2C development.
Thank you, Mr. Rumuno. Please.
Greg Hambley, 75 McLarty Gate. Pursuant to what you're saying, I don't understand then, so that when that land was rezoned from rural to residential, which is kind of a big part of my question.
I'm just going to jump in, sir, because hasn't been rezoned yet. It is still zoned rural.
It's still zoned rural because I was under the impression from how it was being presented is that this has been previously, it's always been zoned residential, which was kind of how that was alluded to in the presentation before. And so if it's still zoned rural, and even before when I was speaking with some people when they were out there, again, I was under the impression that because it was already zoned residential, the cost to recuperate that by the town was much higher than if it was still zoned rural at that point in time. So if we could clarify maybe both of those points, that'd be great. Thank you.
I'll go to Mr. Rumuno again, please.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just to try and clarify, so that there's three parcels. 2 parcels were zoned for residential uses, again, 10, 15 years ago. The eastern block still has the traditional rural zoning, and as part of this application, it is to be rezoned. However, that's the zoning bylaw, which identifies zoning for specific housing types and lot sizes. But at an official plan level, so there's an official plan document, a legal document that identifies land use designations being residential, environmental protection areas. That rural pocket to the east, that is designated under official plan for residential use. That's the proper plan. So you see the entire land holding in red has a residential designation under the official plan, but the zoning bylaw, only 2 of those parcels were zoned residential, again, back in the early 2000s. And as part of this application, the land's required to be zoned from rural to residential. But again, just to clarify, the official plan that dates back to 2000, 2001, identified the entire parcel as residential. And the wildlife park, the environmental protection lands were identified, back in early 2000 and conveyed to the municipality. And the last parcels were conveyed as part of the 2C secondary plan process.
So if Linda, if you put that other slide up, please. So in layman's speak, there's 3 parcels there in the, I don't do colors that well. Is that red? It's all red. Although I do know the top traffic light is the one you stop at. So R3, bracket 281, and R4, bracket 310 were zoned originally for residential. The other, with the RU, is currently zoned as rural, although it's covered in the official plan to be residential at some point. So this application includes a zoning for that particular parcel to go from RU to a specific R3 or a residential designation. I hope that helps clear up that particular issue. I hope. Are there any other questions? Okay, please.
Amandine Boudreau from 18 McClarty Gate. I just have a question, and pardon my naivete, I don't really understand why we would want to sever an environmentally protected area and kind of close it in with residential. Have we done an impact assessment on the wildlife that's currently around the stormwater management? And do we know what's going to happen when there's the construction vehicles, there's all the debris and the noise and the pollution, what will happen to the existing wildlife there and what we expect to do on that environmentally protected land? Is it just for stormwater, or do we have consideration for any flora or fauna that has been established there?
Mr. Ramona, could you explain, please?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. So as part of the original official plan review process, environmental evaluation of all the lands within this area was undertaken, and we identified all the environmental lands that make up the wildlife park. As part of this application, the applicant has submitted additional environmental impact studies, which will be reviewed to ensure that the lands are appropriate for development. Again, just to provide some clarification, that EP block, which is to the north, is the stormwater management park, and it does have an EP zone. A lot of our ponds do have EP zones. However, the wildlife park, the majority of the wildlife park, again, is a corridor that runs the length of the entire concession block, and that stormwater pond, EP, is open to that wildlife park at the northern limits. But again, as part of our review of the environmental background work that is submitted, we will not only look at the road pattern traffic and the lotting, but the connections between the residential lots and the wildlife park.
Thank you, Mr. Does that explain the fact that it is indeed open? It's not enclosed. It looks, I appreciate your point, but it is not enclosed. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Finish. If in terms of the size of that connection, do we have an understanding? Looking at the map, I have no idea. And if there's a buffer zone included, I know there's a 25-meter buffer zone to the east.
So immediately to the north of
yes.
R3 says EP.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the stormwater management pond. So to the northwest of that, it goes up that way, and that is open to the wildlife park.
Right. I guess I mean the buffer zone from the EP on the north east side. Is there a buffer?
You're getting a little more specific than I can handle, so I'll go to Mr. Ramino. But it is open. I just want to be clear.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, just to clarify, so that EP wildlife block that runs north and south already includes the appropriate setbacks. And they varied from 20 to 30 meters throughout that corridor. So the area that you see as EP, the wildlife block, not only includes the environmental protected area, but buffers on either side. So that was already accommodated for when we dealt with the official plans a number of years ago.
Linda, if you could put figure 4 up. I think.
from the report, from the, oh, you may have to put that on your overhead.
That one.
That's it. Go back.
Sir.
Hadi from 58 McClarty. So like I said, I've been living there for 10 years now, and I'm very familiar with that whole pond, that little water management. And if you guys go visit that area, you'll see if those lots, especially lot 1 is built, there it leaves that whole storm water management completely separated from that whole flow of that green space. Because if you guys go there, you'll see that there's like a bridge on that section, and it's completely separated on that section there. And that lot will completely separate that stormwater from that whole green space. There's no green connecting that stormwater to that space if those lots go in there. And I speak from experience because I'm there 24/7 with my kids, and the traffic that goes along with whether it's people walking their dogs or walking around that pond is unbelievable, and that will all be lost if those lots go in. So I think everyone here speaks, or we're all on the same page. Lot 1 to 4 will just kill that whole water management pond that you guys have there, let alone the view from, it'll just block that whole street. So that whole street looking down right now, there's a pond in front of you and there's green space right behind it. That's just gonna kill that whole neighborhood, and that pond will be completely blocked from that green space. And at any given point, I do recommend any one of you will go over there and we'll see wildlife in that pond that will have no access to that green space that flows straight from St. John's all the way down. And if you look at the bigger map, you see how it goes around. That's why it doesn't make sense to us. So you have green space that comes straight down along from St. John's all the way to Wellington that will have to loop around that one significant area. And that's the only area that it'll have to loop around if you look at the bigger map, coming straight down from St. John's all the way to Wellington. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other speakers at this point?
Hello, everyone. My name is Jianjun Qiao. I'm living in 63 Towner Crescent. My family just, moved in June last year to that address. Actually, every day, like my neighbor said that, there's a lot of wildlife, around that area. If we build something, I personally believe I haven't say that environmental impact on that area, but I think from my experience for those like past 6 or 8 months, it will kill this, wildlife. That's such small area, but for those wildlife, it's bigger. It's a fundamental. Why build such, just like, for development perspective, it's like 25 homes, but for the wildlife, it could be a huge impact. So I support, the substantial development, balanced development. However, for this area, it's like my neighbor said, once it's built, there's no connection between the storm pond to the whole that corridor. So I think that's the big impact on the wild animals. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, I'm David Rossi, live at 45 McClarty Gate. Really just had a couple of questions. So the stormwater drain area is considered environmentally protected? Is that correct? It's zoned EP as well?
I'm sorry?
The water drainage pond, it's also zoned as an EP zone as well. So just from what I'm looking at, I see the setbacks to the east, but I don't see a lot of setback, and I know the area around the pond is big, but it just doesn't seem like there's enough setback with Lot 1 and the road itself with drainage and what comes with a road. So I just some clarification on the setback on the west side of this application.
Thank you. Mr. Maruno?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. So that existing stormwater management pond was designed to accommodate, from my understanding, and it's something that we will verify as part of this review, these future blocks as well. There is no buffer to the west because that stormwater management pond is developable property, but it's there to serve a function for the neighborhood. We do have different zones for stormwater management ponds. In this instance, it does have an EP zone, but it's not environmentally protected property. It is a stormwater management facility. We do have other areas where we, zones where we do zone stormwater management ponds open space. So it is a facility that was constructed to serve the community, but also to accommodate these lands as well. But again, we've heard the concerns, and we will complete our review and report back to council on some, and trying to address all the concerns that we've heard here this evening with respect to buffer setbacks and the function of the EP area.
Ma'am?
Hi, I'm Lorraine Pennington, and I'm from 91 Kane Crescent. So I haven't formally prepared anything for tonight, but I just want to also echo some other concerns. I definitely agree with all the comments presented by the other residents in regards to wildlife and protection and traffic concerns. I just wanted to touch on a point about the actual number of houses that is proposed here and how that's determined. Looking at the map, initially we thought that there was 6 or 8 houses going to be in that area, and obviously there's a lot more than that. My particular home on King Crescent is now going to have 5 homes backing directly onto us. So I'm just concerned about the size of the lots and the number of homes that are being proposed into that small area, and just questioning how that gets decided. From looking at the map, it looks like they're quite a lot smaller than the existing homes in the area, which will also, have an impact on the neighborhood, on house values, and as well as congestion in the neighborhood.
I'll ask Mr. Maruno to comment.
Okay.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. So to the speaker on King Crescent, so that parcel immediately to the east of the King Crescent lots was zoned for residential uses, and again back in the early 2000s. But as part of the review moving forward, we do look at our official plan policies with respect to what the maximum densities are. In this area, the density provision was 10 I believe it was 10 units per acre. So based on our calculations at this point, it is under the density provision of the official plan. But again, we will review the application with respect to whether the lotting that is been shown here by the applicant is appropriate from a lot configuration, frontage, and area size, as well as just the impacts to the wildlife park to the east.
Housing size?
yes, as we also look at housing size based on what the zoning provisions are with respect to lot coverage, heights, and setbacks. So that's something that we will take under consideration as part of our review as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mino. Are there any other questions? What the process is, typically in an application like this, that there's a lot of concern expressed, is that it comes back to another public planning meeting, which is, I suspect, what will happen here. So staff will be taking your comments and your concerns and working with the developer. I will also be, I think, putting together a bit more of a history than we have currently, so that people have a better sense of how this area has developed and where it fits in, especially with respect to some of the concerns that have been expressed on the stormwater management pond, how it connects in the wildlife park, et cetera. So if there's no more questions from the public.
Sorry, one last question. Amandine Boudreau, 18 McLarty Gate. In terms of, you're saying that there'll probably likely be another meeting, a public meeting. Could I ask that we include a little bit more of the community? I understand that I think there's a regulation from the Planning Act that's about 120 meters from the proposed changes. However, if you look at the map and the density of the area, there are a number of families and residents that come through and use the space, and I don't know that they've been informed. I've tried to round up people in 24 hours because that's how much time I've had to look at this because of a busy schedule. But I really think that this is going to have a significant impact, not only on the residents that are within 120 meters of this happening, but of the entire subdivision. So are there provisions? Is it possible to extend the notice of, to the public for the amendment?
We can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to close this portion of the public meeting. I'm going to ask members of council if they have any questions for the proponent with respect to the presentation, and then we'll put the report on the floor. So if there's any questions to the proponent, I've got Councilors Pirie, Marakis, and Tom.
Could we clarify how far we actually circulated this time?
Where, Mr. Mino? 120?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor, we typically, under the Act, do a individual mail-out to residents within 120 meters of the subject lands, but we do obviously extend that to, finish off streets, et cetera. Caitlin has a list for me here. But in addition to that, we do put notices of all these public meetings in both our local newspapers as well as the town's website. So yeah, that's good. So we actually did include an expanded circulation here all the way over to Mavernack. But if council directs a future public meeting, we will certainly take a look at whether we should expand that as well. And again, notices will also go in both our local newspapers, and the information will be on the town's website.
Councilor Perry.
I don't have any questions for the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Marakis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the applicant, was there any consideration given to actually just lopping off those 4 units and cutting it off straight across?
Lopping off the 4 units to the north, yes. We went through a multitude of plans. The configuration is constrained by the water easement that goes across, so you can't really do much on the north there unless you just cross it with the road. The easement goes right across through the road to the subdivision and then crosses the valley. Mm-hmm. So it creates a barrier.
Okay, and actually I'll save my other questions for Mr. Romano.
Councilor Tom.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. The exceptions you've asked for from the parent R3, are those exceptions in order to increase the unit count in this area?
No, they're just standards that were used in the 2C lands. The town zoning bylaw was updated since the 2B lands were first approved, so the zoning changed for those, and we just incorporated what was used in 2C.
Thank you. And currently, the westernmost section of this of these 3 parcels is zoned R3, which is consistent with River Ridge immediately to the west of the property. Right. And you're requesting that we rezone that R3 to an R4, which obviously allows for a higher density. Can you explain why you want to do that? It's certainly going to be...
Mostly due to the configuration of the site. We ended up with having to pull the road right back to the storm pond in order to go north. And just the lotting configuration worked out better for that size of lots. We didn't want to turn the lots to face the existing crescent. We wanted to keep them within the new extension of River Ridge Road. It's just the lot modulation worked out that way.
Right, because one of the ladies who spoke earlier is, obviously if it was maintaining an R3, that instead of 5 homes in her backyard, maybe there'd be 3 or 4.
No, there'd still be the same number of homes. There'd just be a smaller portion of one. Those are 45-foot homes that back onto the pie-shaped lots, and the triangular piece is quite large. There would have always been 2 lots anticipated being in there in some form. And the 3, I think 17, 16, and 15 would just move over, so a portion of 15 would still be on that lot, more than likely.
Thank you.
Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a lot of detailed questions, but I can refer to Mr. Muno later or offline, but through you to the applicant, just a general question: how flexible are you in terms of the count and as well as addressing some of the concerns of the residents regarding lots 1, 2, 3, especially in terms of reconfiguring to allow for more of an opening? Here's a general question: how flexible are you with regards to just generally speaking?
I can't commit the developers to anything right now, but they're experienced developers who've been working with the town of Aurora for many years, and they're very pragmatic people, and they're willing to listen to suggestions. I would like to point out that between lots 3 and 4, beside the cul-de-sac, there will be view corridors out to the open space because there won't be anything built in that area. The lots are too shallow. So there will still be some visual connection as well.
Thank you.
If there's no other comments or questions for the proponent, I will thank you, Joan. Okay. We'll close that portion. If someone will put the recommendation on the floor, please, and if you just want to kind of move an amendment already to come back to another public planning meeting. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Maracas. So it's to come back to another public planning meeting, but I've got Councillors Maracas and Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Ramuno. Mr. Ramuno, we heard about the concerns with the road being so close to the stormwater management pond. I'm just wondering, is there any concerns when it comes to winter maintenance and salt draining into that or getting into the stormwater management pond?
Mr. Mayor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, at this point, I can't answer that, but it's definitely something that we will take a look at and we'll report back at a future date with respect to the function of this storm pond with respect to Street B. So I've made a note of it, and we'll take a look at that.
And thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, when you have those conversations with the applicant, I'm sure that, she's heard here tonight, and I'm sure she'll bring it back to her client as well, that there's some thought, I guess, around the table that it would be more acceptable maybe if those 4 units up at the top were somehow removed and the area was reconfigured slightly to fit that way, and that way that side would be opened up. So when you have those conversations with them, if you could say that that's preference, that would be my preference moving forward on this. So if you can bring those concerns, I would appreciate it.
Thank you. Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. So, and maybe I missed this somewhere, but the proposed R4 and R3 exception zones, why are the lot coverage maximums not applicable? What does that mean?
Mr. Miller.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, I think the applicant is not proposing a maximum lot coverage as part of the application. And we see that occasionally, but again, that's something that we're going to review because we typically do require maximum lot coverages. So that's something we will work with the applicant on to determine the appropriate percentage.
Thanks. Well, I obviously am not in favor of giving a no maximum lot coverage. That's insane. But going back to what I spoke to with the applicant, I mean, obviously, it's the two blocks that were already zoned residential. The southern block was zoned similarly to the, I guess, Kane Crescent, R4 310, and River Ridge, the River Ridge extension was zoned similar to the neighboring properties at R3 281. They're now asking us to allow for an R4 zoning and on most of the property. If you look at the map, I mean, there's the northern 4 units that Councillor Marackets talked about, and two other ones on the southern cul-de-sac, but the remainder is going to be R4. And obviously, you know, they mentioned in their presentation that this was about lot configuration, but obviously they're allowed 11-meter height and a maximum of 50% under the current zoning. They've also applied for more than that. And, you know, I'm hesitant to change the zoning to R4 because, to me, it's the extension of River Ridge and the zoning that the homes that are there now have, and it's currently zoned as, would allow for residential development. It would allow for, although it may seem minor to the developer, pretty major changes, you know, to the streetscape as it moves along, and obviously it impacts the houses that are already on River Ridge. So, you know, that's a major concern of mine, and I'm not sure if you have any rationale. I know we were just given one by the proponent, but is that it? They came and said we need an R4 because of the lot configuration, because I can't understand why you couldn't configure that street. It's a straight street with without the R3 that it currently has. So I don't know if you have an answer to that.
Mr. Miller?
Certainly through you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try to answer that. I mean, the majority of the exceptions that they are seeking have to do with, well, increasing the height, minor reduction in rear yard setbacks, and some interior yard side setbacks. So again, we've noted those comments, and we will work with the applicant and to look at trying to harmonize the zoning with the existing development, and also have discussions with them about reducing the number of lots.
Right. I guess my point is, though, they're asking, right now it's zoned R3. They currently have development rights with that zoning, and they're asking to make it R4, which has basically, you know, again, under our, without even asking for an exception of lot coverage, is 50% versus 35. It's an extra meter height. So it's obvious why they're asking for the rezoning, but they already have current rights for residential development that would clearly fit. It's one thing if you're asking for 0.2 meters on a side yard, and that's because you needed to fit a couple, you know, a couple units in or whatever, like minor changes like that. But obviously, you know, the answer from the proponent was that the lot configuration wouldn't work on R3, and I don't buy that. But perhaps, you know, perhaps we can be presented with more information when this comes back. You know, if it does come back. Anyhow, you know, that's my major concern. Again, looking at height increases, I'm not in favor of increasing the height to 11 meters, or not by 11 meters, but by 1 meter. So my main sticking point is I'm not in favor of switching it to an R4. So unless it can be addressed at the next public planning meeting, I won't be voting to move forward with this application.
Thank you, Councillor Tom. Councillor Thompson.
My comments are going to be similar to Councillor Tom's, but just for clarification, through you to Mr. Ramuno, in the 2B development, in general, is the building height 10 meters or 11 meters?
Mr. Ramuno, do you know that off the top?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and, you know, I'll confirm, but I think there's a number of zones that have both a 10 and 11 meter height within the 2B area. And again, if you look at that zoning map within 2B, just about every subdivision has a number of exceptions. And again, it's tailored to not only height, but in some instances, lot sizes, frontages. So, but no, there's a combination of 10 and 11 meters. There may be the odd pocket that went to 12 as well, but primarily 10 and 11.
I would like to get some clarification, because it does concern me that the applicant said that, you know, they were looking more at the 2C standards, which I can understand is more advantageous for them. But, you know, optically, this area is connected to 2B. And so, as we always say, and I consider this an infill application, that, it's got to be, compatible. It's got to be suitable. It's got to be, minimize the disruption to the neighborhood. And so I wouldn't be looking at standards from 2C. I would be looking at the standards at 2B and make sure it's compatible. I share the same concerns as Councillor Tom with regards to changing from R3 to R4 because, not only is it an extra meter in height, it's more lot coverage, so you're talking about a significant increase in the massing of the buildings. Same with some of the other comments around the table with regards to buffers and so forth. And I also agree, I think we should work with the applicant to try and remove lots 1 through 4, or at least 1 through 3.
Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the 2B development, they incorporate park land allotment for the number of homes. So was this parkland designated already considered for these number of homes that could go in, or for this residential allotment?
Mr. Romero?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my understanding, yes, as part of the 2B, specifically for the 2 blocks that are already zoned, those number of lots were contemplated, and the parkland requirement was addressed at the time that those plans were registered. But again, moving, as part of this review, we will take a look at the parkland requirements, and there's always the option of, with the addition of the lots to the east, if it wasn't addressed at the 2B stage with respect to registering of the Shimvest plan, we can impose the additional cash in lieu for parkland. But it's something that we'll need to take a look at.
I think the comment that's been heard here is that if cash in lieu is one thing, but I think what we would like to see is the property itself. So whether it's a walkway or one of those lots or something, I would like that explored and explained. I think we should have a little bit of appreciation for the wildlife park that we put in, the Mavanac Park, and just sort of a background to sort of give our residents a feel for the whole neighborhood that we do value at this council parkland, and for the neighborhoods. That's why we bought and developed Mavanac Park. We did have an opportunity also, and I don't know that it was closed session or not, Mr. Mayor, but perhaps through you, I think we should let the residents know that we did look at that lot last term. We actually walked it. Last term. And we actually entertained the price tag, and I can't remember what that was. But at the time, we made that decision not to purchase that land, and that's really one of the options that is considered if we were to say, well, you know what, just put all that land into the park and put it onto the wildlife park, and wouldn't it, we have investigated that last term. We didn't make it public, but I think that would be also good information to bring forward as we consider it, so our residents know. A lot of them didn't know that was residential land, then they naturally would have assumed that was part of the wildlife park, correctly or not. But we should try and give as much background information there as we go forward, and all the other things that were already mentioned. It's going to make for a more complete understanding of what it is we're dealing with here. I remember when we, with Hartwell Road, when we entertained that, was right at the beginning of last term, 2B, and people bought those homes thinking that was right on the edge of a wildlife park, and said they had no idea, and they were written into their agreements. And we've heard this before. That's not always understood at the time of purchase, but there was the road going through, and there was a bridge, and there was continuation. But we had to, we addressed that as well at that time, last term. So I think we owe an explanation as much as possible to our residents as why the situation is as it is, and what options we have, and how we look at the whole picture, and how the development all is. the schools have to accommodate, the traffic has to accommodate, and the parks have to be there as well. It's all put into the plan. And this was a little forgotten part. We were aware of it last term, and we did actually consider purchasing it. And I think one of the residents did say, you know, he was aware of it. So I think it would be good for some of the new councillors to, and all of us to have that in the next background information, Mr. Mayor, for the next planning committee meeting, so that we can address some of those points that were brought up.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to all the members of the public for coming out. We hear your concern, and your residents, we're going to try and help you. I agree with everything that's been said at the table. I would just like to know, for clarification, you said, I believe the property is signed, but do we know if the sign is still up? Because a lot of residents don't seem to know that. So could that please be checked? And the second thing, I didn't follow what the proponent was saying about the easement running through the property. Could you try and explain that to me?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. There is an easement, and I think it shows up on Figure 4 that runs east and west from Street A, and that is it's a 6-meter water main easement that runs under the creek to service the 2C subdivision. So between lots and 6, there's an easement on those properties, and that's for the water main that runs, that services 2C.
Thank you. I'm looking at page 5. There's, for the R3 zone, there's 6 exceptions. And for the R4, there are as well. It's just, I mean, it's just too many exceptions. And when you look at what is already in the area, this is a very dense area. This was planned to be a very dense area, and in my opinion, didn't get enough parkland. But there's if you look at page 11, there's R4, 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 R4. We have an R3, but I'm not even sure what an R5 is. Is that townhouses through you, Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Member?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, I don't believe it is. I think, again, we with our new bylaw,
okay,
the numbers have
thank you.
changed, but I think the R5 is it semis? I think R5
Semi-detached
permits semis, and the R6 is towns, yeah.
Yeah.
So the R2, 3s, and 4s are just singles, but varying lot sizes, lot frontages.
Thank you, and I don't have we don't have a map of the overall 2B subdivision, but we can see from this part of it that it's a very dense subdivision, and I agree. There's way too many exceptions. I don't agree taking this to increasing the R4, the residential 4 designation, and I'd like to see what the developer can do to accommodate our residents. Also, I do agree it should come back to a public planning meeting. There's too many issues that need to be solved on behalf of the residents.
Thank you. Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we all have to ask ourselves whether we're dealing with 2B or not 2B. And so we're dealing with 2B. There's absolutely no reason that we should be considering the 2C zoning. That doesn't make sense to me. My preference, we already have parcels that are zoned R3 with exception 281 and R4 with exception 310. I would probably prefer to see those stay as is, and I understand that the current zoning of the rural will likely need to be changed to accommodate this growth, but you know, if you could work in some kind of a transition between R3 and R4, as opposed to changing everything around, I'd be happy with that. So those are my comments, and I do think that we should move forward and bring this back to another public planning meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. I just want to know how long you were working on that. Councillor Gartner, second time.
Thank you. Could Mr. Mino just clarify on page 3 what is meant by transitional application? Because a lot of residents are using this terminology, and I would just like to know what the accurate interpretation of that is.
Mr. Mayor?
My apologies. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Again, that just refers to our new zoning bylaw, 6,000, because as council is aware, that was approved in June, but there were a number of appeals, so it's not yet in full force and effect, but we're hoping to get a decision over the next days from the board. So we just note that we are currently working with both bylaws.
And thank you. I asked that because it is actually a term in which means that we transition from a large area to a smaller area, so we don't do a massive change quickly. Thank you.
Councillor Marcus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Ramuno. I'll ask the same question, Mr. Ramuno, that I asked on the last application. Will this fall under the new legislation or the old?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this will fall under the new legislation.
Okay, thank you. And then I just want to, Mr. Chair, just make a brief comment. I mean, I really agree with the comment from the one resident that, I mean, when you're building a community, it's more than just simply building houses. And I think that this council, as a whole, for the majority of the time during this term, has done a great job of making sure that the development community isn't coming and just jamming in as many houses as possible into open spaces and to increase their profit margins. And we take that into account and consideration, and we look to do the best that we can for our residents and for our community. So as you heard, that I think the majority of us are not in favor of what's being put in front of us, and we'll do what we can to make sure that it's acceptable for all our residents.
Seeing no other comments, the motion is to bring this back to a future public planning meeting. Using your tablets, please. All right, that passes unanimously. That concludes our business for this evening. I do want to remind you, Linda, if you hold up the form again. Oh, got none left? Okay, if you wish to be kept informed, please fill that out. We do put you on a mailing list, but we promise not to send you. What?
Residents' request to increase
Mark was
the
already,
mailing. Okay.
Yeah. I already said we'd do that. Thank you. That is it, Council. May I please have confirming bylaw? Councillor Perry, Councillor Tom. All in favor? Opposed? Carried? Motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Gartner, Councillor Kim. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much for coming out. We do appreciate it. It'll be probably a couple of months before we're back on another exciting Wednesday night. Well, maybe not exciting.